Hi, welcome, welcome, welcome. If you're joining us for the first time, it's a pleasure to have you. And if you're returning, welcome and Happy New Year. Today, I'm going to be going through a topic that will assist you in preparing for your May, June, or January exams. Now, this topic is respiration, and it doesn't matter if you're doing human and social biology or straight biology. This is a fundamental topic that, understanding the concepts of it and the basics of it will definitely assist you to do well in your exam. So let us begin. Okay, so I want to remind you as well to like and subscribe to our channel for more videos. And trust me, this year, a lot more is in store. So don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's get into it. So again, I'm Cavell Hilton, and I'll be the facilitator for this session. All right, so welcome. As mentioned before, today we're going to be looking at respiratory system. And just to let you know that this is the first in the series of human body systems that we are going to be looking at for you to get ready for your 2021 and beyond exams. All right, so my motto as usual is never give up, always try. Okay, so let's look at big concept number one, respiration. So as you know, there are two types of respiration, aerobic respiration and anaerobic respiration. For aerobic respiration, it is the breakdown of glucose to release energy, and it uses oxygen to do this. Now you need to know the chemical and the word formula or equation. So for the chemical formula, it's C6H12O6 plus 6 oxygen, which gives you 6 carbon dioxide, water, and 36 ATP. In other words, for the word equation, it's glucose plus oxygen gives you carbon dioxide, water, and energy. And it's important to note what are the raw materials, the things that goes in, and the products. So remember that the raw materials are on your left and the products are on the right. Now, examiners are usually concerned about both, especially since you must know that oxygen is needed for this process. So oxygen is a raw material. And then, as you can see, there are 3 products: carbon dioxide, water, and energy. Now, carbon dioxide and water are referred to as waste products because then the body definitely have to excrete that. But the energy is the whole point of respiration. So respiration is to make energy, and the body cells use this energy to carry out the characteristics of life. So aerobic respiration occurs in the mitochondria of cells. So that's another distinction that you have to understand and to be able to make. So if they ask you to distinguish between aerobic and anaerobic respiration, the products is one way, the raw material, glucose is needed, and also where it takes place. So aerobic respiration occurs in the mitochondria of cells, and it releases a large amount of energy. So that's also another distinction, the amount of energy that is released. So it releases a large amount of energy, 36 ATP per glucose molecule. Anaerobic respiration now is the breakdown of glucose without oxygen. And this occurs in the cytoplasm of cells, and it releases far less energy, only 2 net ATP. Now, this can take place in bacteria cells, in animal cells, in plant cells, in yeast. So it can take place in different organisms, right? However, some organisms, like human beings, our cells will only respire anaerobically if oxygen is not present, and we can only do it for a short period of time. While some organisms may just respire anaerobically, like some bacteria, they'll just respire anaerobically regardless. All right. So in bacteria and in humans, in bacteria and in animals, including humans, energy and lactic acid are the products. So those are the things that are produced. And if you take a close look at the raw material, notice it's just glucose. There's no oxygen there. And the products, lactic acid and energy. So two things are made, the lactic acid and the energy. The energy is what they really want, right? Even though it's just a small amount, but it's enough to keep the cell alive. All right, so in fungi, example, yeast, and in plants, ethanol, carbon dioxide, and energy are produced. So as you can see for this, there's no oxygen in the raw material. However, for the products, there are three things that are being produced. Ethanol, right, or alcohol, as we may know it, carbon dioxide, and the energy. Again, the whole point is to get the energy. So the ethanol and carbon dioxide are referred to as waste products. And of course, human beings, you know, we're so ingenious. We found a way how to utilize these so-called waste products to our benefit or our advantage. So the carbon dioxide that the yeast produce allows bread to rise. And so we're able to make biscuits and bread and all of these goodies, right? While we use the ethanol to make wines and spirits and beers. Same for the bacteria. When bacteria ferments, it produces that lactic acid, which is sour. We use it for sour cream, for yogurt, and to create the different cheeses. Now, if we're to compare now, so just to summarize everything that I've said, we could just construct a table like this, where you have aerobic versus anaerobic respiration. So oxygen is required for aerobic respiration, yes. While for anaerobic, no. Where is it located? For aerobic respiration, mitochondria. For anaerobic, cytoplasm. What are the raw materials? For aerobic respiration, it's glucose and oxygen. And for anaerobic, just the glucose, okay? Now, we can also look at the amount of energy as mentioned before. Large amount, 36 ATP versus a small amount, only 2 ATP in anaerobic respiration. What are the end products? What is produced as a result of it? Carbon dioxide and water and ATP. So you have three products there in humans and bacteria. And for anaerobic respiration, it's lactic acid and ATP. For the end products in plants and fungi, you have carbon dioxide, water, and ATP in aerobic respiration. So you can see that doesn't matter if it's human, bacteria, plant, or fungi, they tend to have the same products for aerobic, but they differ in anaerobic. So in anaerobic, for yeast and plants, you have carbon dioxide, ethanol, and ATP. While for animals and bacteria, you just have the lactic acid and the ATP. Now, what is oxygen? That is a question that is often asked in some way or some form, and you have to be able to understand the principle of it in order to be able to apply the knowledge, right? So during vigorous exercise, oxygen is not delivered to the active muscle cells. So it can't get to it quickly enough. That's what it is saying. So remember, in order for us to get oxygen to our cells, we have to be able to breathe in, take in that oxygen. Now, if we're doing vigorous exercise, you can't take enough breaths to the activity that you're doing, to how vigorous you're working out or how much activity your cells, to the demand then that the cells require. So you're exercising and you're breathing. And as you can tell, if you've exercised before, which everybody have, your breathing rate would have changed. So you would start breathing faster, right? But it's still not enough to get enough oxygen to your cells based on the demand that they, would have for it. So this creates a debt, right? It creates a deficit. So as a result of that, some of the cells start to respire anaerobically because they're not getting enough oxygen, okay? So this causes lactic acid to be produced. And as we know, lactic acid is like a waste product because your body can't really use it any further. It's just a quick way for the body to sort of like get the energy, which is what it really needs. And then, kind of just say, okay, part is lactic acid over there. okay? And waiting for when you are able to repay the oxygen debt, then the lactic acid would be broken down. All right. So once you repay the oxygen debt, that is, you stop exercising and now you start to breathe deeper and heavier, you're able to now remove the lactic acid from your muscle cells and, you know, recover. Okay. However, if you do not recover, then you would have a buildup of the lactic acid in your muscle cells. So you'd have a buildup of the lactic acid in your muscle cells, and that now can cause soreness and fatigue. So oxygen debt is the oxygen owed or needed to remove all of the lactate that has accumulated in your body cells. What is the difference though between breathing and respiration? Breathing is a mechanical process that involves movement of air in and out of the lungs, while respiration is the breakdown of food, mainly glucose and lipids, to release energy in the form of ATP. So there you can see breathing is a mechanical or physical process, right? And it involves movement of air in and out of the lungs, not movement of oxygen and carbon dioxide out. That is gas exchange, right? So it's movement of air because it knows it's not going to discriminate and say only oxygen alone enter. So all the air goes in and air comes back out. And respiration, though, is the breakdown of food, which is mainly glucose, because glucose is the primary source of energy. However, if you have depleted those sources, then your body will start to break down the fat that is stored. So that is the whole point of it, as mentioned before, is to release energy. All right. So in breathing, as you can see, it's a physical or mechanical process, and it takes place, you know, through the lung and the other respiratory structures that are involved in the process. While for respiration, it's a cellular process and it takes place in the mitochondria. What is in the air we breathe? Good question. Not just oxygen, right? So in fact, in inhaled air, the air that we breathe in, you have 21% oxygen, 79% nitrogen, 0.04% carbon dioxide, and a variable amount of water vapor. While in the exhaled air, you have 16% oxygen, 79% nitrogen, 4% carbon dioxide, and a variable amount. So as you can see from this comparison, the amount of oxygen would have decreased, right? So you're moving from 21% to 16% in exhaled air. However, the nitrogen amount would remain the same because we do not use nitrogen gas in that form, right? 0.04% carbon dioxide to 4%. So it would have increased because, as you should remember, carbon dioxide is a waste product of respiration. So the amount would increase from what we breathe in so that we can get rid of that waste when we exhale. Why do we need to breathe? You know, why is breathing important? So all the cells in your body require oxygen to survive. In fact, if you're being born and your brain cells are without oxygen for a few minutes, you know, you could literally end up having a congenital birth defect, or let's say you probably have some brain issues going forward. So oxygen is extremely important. We don't want to end up brain dead if your brain cells don't get enough oxygen. So without oxygen, your cells couldn't move, build, reproduce, or turn food into energy. And the cells would pretty much die without oxygen. Therefore, oxygen is needed. And how do we get that oxygen? By breathing. So breathing provides a fresh supply of oxygen. Structure and function of the respiratory system. So as mentioned before, breathing is a physical process. So it involves a number of structures, right? And all of these structures have a particular function. So the nasal passage or cavity contains small hairs and goblet cells. These goblet cells secrete mucus that helps to trap the dust and bacteria, and the hairs help to sweep the dust and bacteria and warms and moistens the air. While the pharynx, which is the back of the throat, connects your mouth and your nasal passage. The epiglottis is a flap of cartilage behind your tongue. And we know that it helps close the opening of your windpipe when you swallow. So you cannot swallow and breathe at the same time. In fact, if you're sleeping, if you have anything in your mouth, you know, it's unlikely that you're going to swallow it, right? So, because it will end up choking or something, because you cannot breathe and swallow at the same time. Because the epiglottis close the flap to the trachea when you swallow. Larynx contains a vocal cord. So it's right here. If you put your finger there, you feel it vibrating. Right. So that's your larynx. Your vocal cords vibrate to produce sound. And then you have your trachea. So going down, you'd have your trachea, which is a tube. So it's not made of bone, but it's a tube that, you know, it's erect or keeps stiffened by the C-shaped cartilage, which prevents it from collapsing. And this is the air that takes this is the structure that takes the air, you know, that you breathe in from, you know, through your nostril and goes down into your lungs. Then you have your bronchi. So your bronchi branches out from the trachea and it carries air in and out of the lungs. The bronchiole are further branches of the bronchi, and they're very small or thin tubes, and they pretty much just take the air from the alveolus. It's almost like it's playing a relay system, isn't it? So first it goes through your nose, your nasal passage, goes to your pharynx, your larynx, and then, you know, of course, it's going into the trachea, and then the trachea takes it to the bronchi, and the bronchi takes it to the bronchiole, and then the bronchiole takes it to the alveoli, and then it completes there, right? So it's sort of like that relay process. So you're passing the air on. So your diaphragm now is a large sheet of muscle, separate the chest cavity from the lower part of your body, and it contracts and relaxes as you breathe in and out. Then you also have intercostal muscles, which may be internal, you know, you have both internal and external, and they're attached to the rib cage. So they help to move the ribs up and down. As you should, well, if you have done skeletal system any at all before, if not, when you get there, you recognize that bones cannot move on their own. So they need muscles to be attached to them, and those muscles contract and relax to allow it to move. All right, so what happens during inspiration and expiration? It's very important that you practice this process on yourself. It makes it much easier and relatable for you in the exam, all right? So if you're saying inhalation, take a deep breath, hold it. Now, as you can see, when I took a deep breath, my chest went up, right? I could feel it in my stomach, so I know my diaphragm muscles, they tighten, so they contract, right? So those are two things already that I know happens during inspiration. And when I breathe out, the opposite takes place. My diaphragm muscle relaxed and my chest moved down. I should also be able to understand that the volume of air would have increased in my lung because I would have filled it with air, right? But it would have decreased when I breathed out. So those are things that you can easily remember, all right? So that's, I'm going to teach you another trick now with this table that you can easily just figure it out, right? So your rib cage, as mentioned before, when you breathe in, it moves up and out, you know, like a proud chest. It moves up and out. And your diaphragm moves down. It contracts and moves down. The volume of air in your volume of lungs, it should be the volume of air in your lungs increases and the air pressure decreases. So one of the things to remember is that the volume of air increases, the air pressure does the opposite. So the volume of air increases in your lungs while the air pressure decreases, right? Then air flows into your lungs. The opposite is what happens for expiration. So once you know inspiration, it should be easy to figure out what happens in expiration. So for expiration, your rib cage would move down and in, the diaphragm would move up and it would relax. your volume of lungs, volume of air in your lungs would decrease and the pressure would increase and the air would flow out of your lungs. So what is gaseous exchange? So we've covered what is respiration. We've covered what is breathing. So now the next process is, what is gaseous exchange? So it is the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide at the respiratory surface. And this takes place through permeable gas exchange surfaces. And of course, all of this, so the breathing is important for respiration because that is how you get the air into the lungs. And then now gaseous exchange is a process of actually getting the oxygen from that air, okay? And then now what happens to that oxygen? The cells use it to make energy. The gaseous exchange system. So during gas exchange, oxygen diffuses from the air into the alveolus, into the blood capillaries around the alveolus, and the carbon dioxide diffuses in the opposite direction. So as you can see from this diagram, oxygen is going in and it's being taken up by the red blood cells, which are responsible for the transport of oxygen around the body. And as you can see as well, carbon dioxide is leaving the said red blood cells. So look at the color. So they're blue. You know, people say when certain people die or you're lacking in oxygen, they turn blue. So that's because there's no deoxygenated blood. So as you can see, this blood that is coming in from the pulmonary artery is that deoxygenated blood, which means it contains not much or any oxygen and a lot of carbon dioxide. But as you can see, as the oxygen enters the red blood cells, they start to change. Let me just get back there quickly. So as oxygen gets into the red blood cells, they start to change color. And when they leave via the pulmonary, when they leave the capillary to go into the pulmonary vein, this is now oxygenated blood, which is bright red. So again, this is a diagram that shows it to you up close. So it can show you the oxygen going in and the carbon dioxide leaving, and the two different colors are presented there. It also shows you the hemoglobin molecule, which would bind the 4 oxygen molecules to it, and it shows you what's happening here. We talked about it being permeable. So remember that it's one cell thick to allow the gases to pass to diffuse. So diffusion is the process. So it allows the gases to diffuse across easily. All right, so let's look at some questions quickly. So figure 1 is a diagram of part of the human respiratory system, right? So name the structures labeled A, B, and C. So what is A? And by the way, hope you notice that this is the epiglottis right here. So what is A? So A is the larynx, B is the trachea, and C is the bronchiole. Breathing is the movement of air in and out of the lungs. As we mentioned before, identify the structures labeled A, B, and C in figure 2. Write your answers in the spaces provided. So there you have A, B, and C. What do you think A is? You guessed it right. So A is the bronchiole, and B, look at B. So it already says here that these are blood capillaries. So you want to make your answer a little bit more specific here, right? So this is already labeled as blood capillaries. And as you can see, there are 2 different shades here. So this is shaded darker, and there are arrows that are showing you that it's going out. So what will be going out, and that is bright red, that will be oxygenated blood, and that is taken from the alveolar, the lungs, via the pulmonary vein, right? The only vein that carries oxygenated blood, right? And then, so this B now would more likely be a capillary going to the pulmonary artery, or coming from the pulmonary artery. So that one will be carrying deoxygenated blood. What is C? C is the alveoli. So item 15 refers to the following drawing of a model used to demonstrate breathing in humans. Which of the labeled part represents the diaphragm? So that would be 4, right? So the answer would be D. But of course, when you're looking at these questions, don't just memorize the answer. That is just so lazy. Look at all aspects, because they can just easily change it and ask you using the same diagram, but asking you what is I, or which labeled part is the alveoli, or which labeled part is the trachea. So when you look at the diagram, ensure that you're able to label all of it. So we know that I would be the trachea, 2 would be the alveoli, and if they had labeled here, that would be the bronchi, or bronchus, singular. So during a sprint, muscles in the human body produce lactic acid by the process of lactic acid. Which process did we say that was produced at? Correct. So it's anaerobic respiration. Which of the following is the correct sequence of events in the mouth-to-mouth resuscitation? So when you look at this, you just look at it and, can use your common sense to kind of figure out which one comes first. Use the process of elimination to get rid of the ones that you know are clearly incorrect. So you need to tilt the head backward. So which one starts with 4? That's C and D. So right away you can eliminate A and B. After you tilt the head backward, then you're going to need to pinch your nostrils. So that's 4, then comes 1. So clearly your answer is C. So 2, place your mouth over, remove your mouth must be the last step. So C is the answer. During respiration, the release of energy in a cell occurs when? So this is a very important concept. When does energy, because you have energy creation, which we kind of focus on in terms of making ATP. But what happens to ATP when it releases the energy? It actually is converted back to ADP, because the energy is stored in the 3rd phosphate. So if you did not know before, understand this now. ADP stands for adenosine diphosphate, which means 2 phosphate molecules, while adenosine triphosphate is ATP, which is 3 phosphate molecules. Now, when it is ADP, another phosphate needs to be added to it for you to get ATP, okay? Now, the energy is stored in that bond that adds that 3rd phosphate. So in order to release the energy, the bond has to be broken. So during respiration, to release energy, ATP is converted to ADP. To make energy, ADP is converted to ATP. So how I usually represent it on the board, I would draw an arrow that goes both ways, because that's how the process can work, right? So you can have ATP to ADP, and you can have ADP to ATP. That's it. Which of the following substances found in cigarette smoke is addictive? That would be nicotine. But even though this is the response for this question, ensure that you know the function of all the different parts, or components rather, of cigarette smoke. So you make sure you know that tar is carcinogenic, so it can cause lung cancer. Make sure you know what about carbon monoxide having a high affinity. Well, the red blood cells having a high affinity for carbon monoxide, and that it can actually cause death if you have prolonged exposure to it. Those kind of things. So ensure that you know the function, or the effect rather, of all the components of cigarette smoke. And that is it for today. And as you can see, my next session, big concept number 2, will be about photosynthesis. Trust me, you don't want to miss it. So remember to like and subscribe. Like and subscribe to STEMBuildersJm.com. Don't forget now, like and subscribe for more incredible videos. Okay, it was a pleasure having you today. I'll see you same time, same place, next week. Bye.